Beginning with the original days of American history, where America was first developing as a nation, the American Revolution War was an important and impactful event that provides a clear example of continuity and change in American history on an international scale. Beginning on April 19th, 1775, with the shot heard around the world, the revolution was a brand new concept for the world at the time. With the Americans wishing for the creation of the revolutionary representative government by and for the people, the colonists were not only fighting for their land but also political freedom. To insert the colonies into the world of international scale affairs with the war raging on, the British were very quick to add German mercenaries known as Hessians to their ranks. Besides this, it took the colonists much longer to persuade France to join the fight. They had received financial and material aid from France since 1776. However, France did not officially declare war until 1778, 3 years into the conflict. This therefore brought the war to a greater international scale, now including not only British and newly deemed Americans, but only Germans and French soldiers as well. Next on the list of events that sparked America's interest on an international scale was the War of 1812. Beginning on June 12, 1812, and ending on December 14, 1814, this conflict occurred during a time of seemingly high tensions overseas from North America. The U.S. was still attempting to get its feet firmly on the ground in terms of trade. However, this could not be accomplished without countries to trade with, something that was becoming harder for American ships to do with the conflicts overseas, such as the French Revolution and Napoleonic Wars. This resulted in countries such as Spain, France, and Britain discouraging ships from trading with one another. Besides this, things like impressment or the seizing of American sailors by the British built pressure to the point where the war was declared, mainly because of maritime rights. This event is another prime example of America in the world, as they dealt with Britain and had to stand up for trade rights previously established by the two countries. It also enacts continuity of forming American international diplomacy, as although there was a war to be waged over such things as trade, in the end, the U.S. was able to negotiate change with the British. One major change that came from the war was the arbitration clauses of Ghent, something included in the Ghent Treaty, which was the document to end the fighting. This document just so happens to be the treaty's most important feature. It arranges to settle outstanding disagreements, established methods that could adapt to the U.S. administrations, British ministries, and world events, thus leading to good riddance of any need for international conflict. Next on the list of events that brought forth continuity of an international American identity was the concept of manifest destiny. First introduced in 1845 in an essay by editor John L. O'Sullivan, the concept of manifest destiny was practiced by Americans for the better part of the 1800s and continuing into the 1900s. This concept of a God-given right to expand westward was something that had been exploited beforehand, but was not in full swing until the Reconstruction of the southern U.S. after the end of the Civil War in early 1865. With the ceasing of international conflict, Americans could focus their attention westward in hopes of a new frontier. This concept of expansion, although unassuming at first, was a great deal to do with the international affairs if one recognizes the original inhabitants of the western United States. Although not formally recognized as nations by the federal government, the Native American people were indeed themselves a group of many nations that had to experience changes with the new frontiermen and overall loss of land. This idea brings forth a continuity in a national identity, as just like their ancestors crossing the Appalachian Mountains decades before them, the desire to roam west had not changed in the eyes of the American. However, the ideals also brought forth change in the U.S., as those who had once been the underdog fighting for their land had now stripped the natives of their own land in order for national expansion. Continuing on a path of American expansion, Another international conflict would soon arise in order to take the place of Manifest Destiny's national grasp. Beginning on April 21st, 1898, and ending on July 17th of the same year, the Spanish-American War was a continuation of the concept of national expansion through international affairs. Beginning over the controversial explosion of the USS Maine in February of 1898, the American public had spiraled out of control, with the articles released through the greedy articles of yellow journalism at the time regarding the explosion, blaming Spain with chants such as "Remember the Maine." The concept, related to producing an attractive article by stretching the truth, would soon lead to a full-on war as the matter took hold in Congress, with both Republicans and Democrats seeing necessary intervention. Therefore, war was fought over the course of the next several months, with the conclusion being that neither side was ready for a full-scale conflict. In the end, the war provides another example of the continuation of concepts like Manifest Destiny, as although the U.S. had reached their western borders at this point, the government collected land such as the Philippines, Guam, Puerto Rico, and Cuba gained their own sovereignty from the Spanish government, leading to a greater expansion. The affair also led to change in foreign policy with the addition of Cuba as a cross between a new addition to the U.S. and an independent nation, as Cuba was independent but the U.S. could step in at any moment as a sort of overseer. Bringing in the fifth event in the U.S. history that exemplified the U.S. in international affairs was the Gulf of Tonkin incident and the costly Vietnam War. On August 7, 1964, President Lyndon B. Johnson was given the power as President of the United States and Commander-in-Chief of the military to provide support to the Vietnamese people via the military's increased involvement in the Vietnam War. This transfer of power came after the U.S. ships had been attacked while in international waters in the Gulf of Tonkin. This role change resulted in great change for the American government, as the role of president had become less balanced before and now stripped Congress of some of its key regulatory functions, overriding the need for a declaration of war. As an example of America and the world, the U.S. had first entered this conflict in order to stop the spread of communism in the North Vietnamese, a game that they would continue to play in other affairs years down the line. This effort to push an agenda relates not only to the previous ideas of Manifest Destiny, but also back to the revolution, and although not fighting for themselves, the U.S. believed they could bring freedom to Vietnam as well. With the war ending in April of 1975, this was not accomplished. However, the international policy of the spread of American political ideals was forever embedded into the worldwide landscape, even with the change of powers being stripped from the president. Finally, connecting these past topics, one connection that runs in parallel with the past is the Ukraine conflict. Although it is yet another military dispute, the present affair is easily differentiated, providing great change from previous events. With the majority of the world at a standstill in order to maintain peace, refraining from all-out war has been difficult for the United States when conquering its case. While it is true that the government has not been able to make a complete intervention, it is true that they have provided an estimated $44.3 billion to the war effort. This example provides a continuation of America and the world, as well as they continue to strive for the freedom of other nations from the strain of imposing rule, similar to that of the Philippines and their own colonies circa the Revolutionary era. In conclusion, the United States as a whole has changed a lot as a country, but there are still core values that to this day run through the veins of the country's international efforts.